Hello and welcome to the first Tai Chi Notebook podcast of 2023. Happy Year of the Rabbit. My guest for this episode is Wain Williams. Will has a background in Taiji Mantis Kung Fu, which he trained in China, where he lived for 13 years. He's also travelled around China documenting ancient Kung Fu systems for his YouTube channel, Monkey Steals Peach. Here we talk about Will's travels, as well as his upcoming trip to Taiwan, and how he's recently started Brazilian Jiujitsu. So, here he is. Will, hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. You?
Excellent, I'm very good. I'm in very cold Britain, and you're in, it looks like very warm Australia. How is it over there?
Warm, but raining.
Oh, right, okay. So, we've got no rain, but it's bloody freezing in Britain at the moment. Had a real cold snap.
I don't envy you there.
No. Obviously, you're from Britain at some point. I can tell by the accent.
Yeah.
So how did you end up in Australia?
Well, I spent 13 years living in China, and it kind of got to the point where I was like, this is enough now.
Right.
13 years is a long time, but I didn't want to go back to the UK, so...
I don't blame you.
Yeah. Yeah, so Australia was a place that I'd been I'd visited quite a few times to escape China's winter, coming back to the Southern Hemisphere. So I thought, this is a pretty nice place. So I came over here, did a master's degree, just finished that last year, and then, on my way to try and get permanent residence.
Yeah, but your main style you started with is Mantis, wasn't it? Did you start that in the UK?
No, actually, I started Wing Chun in the UK.
Okay.
And then I kind of stumbled upon Mantis when I moved to China, purely just through chance, I guess, because originally I was actually looking for an English teaching job in Guangdong province because I was involved in Wing Chun. So I thought, Guangdong's where Wing Chun's from, but I couldn't find any work there. And I ended up getting a job in Qingdao in Shandong province. And I had no idea at the time, but it turned out that Shandong is the home of Mantis. So when I found that out, it was just kind of natural to...
Right place, right time.
There, right?
Yeah, interesting. And what was it initially about Mantis that tempted you away from Wing Chun?
I think it was just kind of like... Mantis has a bit of everything because it's a very comprehensive system. One of the things with Wing Chun is almost all of the training really is paired training, which obviously is great. Like you need to do applications, you need to do sparring, you need to do sticky hands and all of that. But, you don't always have a training partner with you, which is something we can, mention about jiu-jitsu a bit later. But Mantis is very complete and very comprehensive, and it uses the body.
Probably it makes more use of the body, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Because Wing Chun, the solo forms, they're not stationary, but they're not far off stationary, are they?
Yeah, exactly. So, because we spend a lot of time solo training, right? You don't always have people that you can train with. So, when you're at home by yourself, it's kind of hard with Wing Chun to really get like a workout just from doing the art itself. Whereas Mantis, because of the way it uses the body, it does train sort of every aspect, conditioning, cardio, leg strength, back strength, sort of all works.
So it's like taking multivitamins instead of taking just vitamin C. It's a bit of everything. Yeah. Oh, interesting. I've seen you doing some of your Mantis forms. They look really, really good. And that, like you say, you do a lot of range of motion in the Mantis stuff, don't you? It's very I wouldn't describe what I've seen you do as like wushu. It's not being done for aesthetic reasons. It all looks quite practical, but it does involve stretching out the hands, stretching back the head. There's forward bending, backward bending. It's very far away from just sort of like, let's just stay vertical and turn slightly.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And you've also researched the history of various Chinese martial arts in China on what turned into documentaries through your website. Do you want to talk a bit about those and what you've done?
Yeah, so when I first moved to China, I started writing a little blog, and that kind of grew into a website. And I always had this idea that I wanted to make videos, but I was so bad at talking on camera that it took years to just really actually be able to do it. Honestly, I tried so many times. Like I'd go out in Yantai where I was living, and I'd take a camera and I'd try and film some little vlog to like explain some stuff, and it was just a failure. There was so many failed attempts.
Yeah.
Finally, one day I was like, okay, I just gotta do it, and I basically just like planned a trip to go and interview some martial art masters, because I kind of gave myself like, there's no way out if I plan all this now. So I just, kind of forced myself into it, burnt the bridge, so there was no going back.
Yeah.
Finally, it kind of worked.
Nice. And what was the first sort of set of masters you went to visit?
The very first one I did was actually, I went to Singapore, which kind of seems a little bit weird when I was living in China, but I had a couple of friends in Singapore that had quite a lot of connections there with different masters of different styles, both Chinese styles and Malay, some Malay Silat. So as the opportunity presented itself, that was kind of my first attempt at filming stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when the channel really sort of like got its feet on the ground and when it really got going was when I went to the villages around Shaolin Temple to cover like the old styles of Shaolin.
Oh, nice.
I think that was the thing when I really, people really started to notice what I was doing.
Because a lot of these are on YouTube, aren't they? Because I think do you give it to your patrons first and then it goes on YouTube? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Patrons get early access, and there's some extra videos and things they get on there as well.
Right. Yeah. So
like a little bit more sort of nerdy stuff.
Yeah, the deeper details. Yeah. But I remember you did a lot of stuff about the history of Shaolin.
Yeah.
Because obviously that's contentious for a lot of reasons. And we're never quite being told the full story, are we? And it was interesting to see you actually go there and walk around these places and meet the people, and actually do it firsthand, which was good.
Yeah, because I think what was kind of interesting for me about that was all these sort of online arguments and everyone's like an online expert. And so many people were like, Shaolin Kung Fu was dead. There was nothing there until they reopened the temple after they filmed the movie with Jet Li. And like what people forget is that, the Shaolin Temple isn't just in the middle of nowhere. It's in the most densely populated part of China. I mean, the town of Dongfeng, I'm not sure off the top of my head the population, but I'm pretty sure it's possibly even pushing 1 million. I mean, it's a big place, and it's still only 1 hour or so away from Zhengzhou, which is the provincial capital. I mean, it's a hugely populated area. So, I mean, it's not just like, the Shaolin Temple was burnt down by a warlord in, I think, 1929. But, there's still so many people in the area that this heritage, this culture was still there. People were still practicing. I mean, it was a building that was burnt down.
Exactly. And the Kung Fu lives in people, not in buildings, doesn't it?
Exactly. So that was quite interesting going around the villages, because you got to see a lot of the older styles and how they're preserved. And some stuff was quite similar to what they do at the temple, but some stuff's a little bit different as well. There's a little bit sort of, I guess, like being an archaeologist in a way, trying to dig up remains. There's very few complete systems. Most of these people are like quite old peasants, and they've gone through a lot of famine and poverty, and they've had a really harsh life, and practicing martial arts has not been like their focus throughout their entire life, right? It's not been like a priority for them. But they have learned things, to varying degrees. Some people know more than others, and some people know this and some people know that. So it was it was interesting from that point of view.
And I think you've got an unannounced new trip coming up as well, which you could tell all my listeners about if you like.
Yeah, so I'm going to Taiwan next week, actually, which is going to be interesting for me because, as I said earlier, I've spent 13 years in China, and I've been, Hong Kong and Malaysia and throughout Southeast Asia. But up to now, I've never been to Taiwan before. So that's going to be really interesting, sort of from the martial point of view, but also just to see the culture and society, because it's kind of like, I guess you could say, the other side of the story.
Yeah, well, when it's a political hot potato as well, isn't it, right now, with China?
Yes, very much, yeah.
So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen while you're there? I mean, maybe some invasion will break out, but let's hope not.
Yeah. I think they have been flying some planes into Taiwanese airspace.
Yeah.
just in the last couple of weeks.
I know the whole Ukraine thing has taught us anything. This is how they start. It's military exercises getting bigger and bigger and bigger next to it, and then it almost becomes this inevitable, it has to happen sort of problem, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, without going too far into the politics, though, I don't think China actually would invade Taiwan, because it's better to have this sort of constant, what's the word?
Propaganda thing.
Yeah, this sort of idea of like the potential that we could take back Taiwan if we wanted. It's the whole sort of 1984 thing of having this constant idea of like an enemy at the gates. Sort of thing.
Yeah. I guess it's a great distraction, isn't it? A distraction tool for any scandal that breaks out in your government. You just just put Taiwan back on the fly a few planes over, put it back on the headlines, and bury the bad news.
Exactly.
I mean, I really hope nothing does break out because America's involved, and I think the last thing the world needs right now is America and China getting at it. So,
yeah, there's not enough to gain and too much to lose.
Exactly. But it's an interesting place to look at in terms of martial arts, isn't it? Because a lot of the, when the communists and the nationalists were fighting in China, a lot of the nationalists escaped to Taiwan, and they kind of took their martial arts with them. But obviously there would have been stuff that was already there that was perhaps older than that. So I guess you've got like an interesting mix of things, and it will. I mean, that was a long time ago as well. So everything will have developed its own way since then.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, 1949? So that's a long time for things to develop. But yeah, that's something I definitely want to focus on is, so, the local Taiwanese culture is mostly like Hokkien or Fujian culture. So the styles that were in Taiwan before then were things like White Crane, Tai Zu Chuan, Da Zun Chuan, Luohan Chuan, whatever, like all these like southern, what we call southern Shaolin styles.
Mm-hmm.
But when the Kuomintang, fled to Taiwan, relocated the government there, and a lot of these masters, as you said, were loyal to the Kuomintang, and they were part of the Guoshuguan movement. So, yeah, I guess, it wasn't really worth staying in China and risking, the rile of the Communist Party. So a lot of them went over to Taiwan, and that's when all these northern styles came in. You've got Dingy and Bagua and Long Fist and Mantis and Aji Chuan and whatever. So I'm interested to look at, both sides of it.
Do you remember that BBC documentary, Way of the Warrior? I mean, it was before my time.
Yeah, I do.
But I've seen it on YouTube, and Hung Shang is on there, and his son's on there too, doing Xingyi. I think he does a swallow form.
It's been so long since I saw that. I can remember Hong Yishan because he's got a really big belly.
Yes, yeah.
Trousers pulled. Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And his son's on there doing the swallow from Xingyi, and it's very nice. Yeah, it's got that particular look of Koshu about it. And they were interesting because they started wearing karate uniforms almost, and took a lot of influence from Japan and things like that about the way they presented the art, which was I thought I've never quite got to the bottom of why they kind of put almost these judo suits on.
Association Tang Shou Dao, which is the Chinese pronunciation of karate, or like the old name for karate,
right? Yeah.
Because I am hoping to meet his son. That's not 100% confirmed yet, but probably. So that will be something that I would like to find out about. I mean, I'm gonna guess. Maybe it's because, Taiwan was a Japanese colony before World War II, so there's quite a bit of Japanese cultural influence in Taiwan.
Yeah, quite possible, isn't it?
But that's just speculation. Otherwise, I don't know.
It's interesting anyway. It's a strange anomaly that I've always wondered about. If you can get to the bottom of that for me, that would be great, thanks. I'll just send you out there to solve these problems for me. Yeah, very interesting. So that's your history in martial arts. It's very, very much into Chinese stuff, and you've got a vast knowledge of all these different systems, and you've met a lot of the actual masters of these systems. I mean, you also did one of your documentaries. You went around looking at Xingyi and Shini Luhe,
Yeah.
which was like, that was a fascinating trip. But you met a lot of these people who had the family name of these systems. You know, you're very well versed in all these different Chinese arts, and then you started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I find interesting because I did the same thing. I started back in 2011. Do you want to talk a little bit about what drew you to that and why you got involved?
You know, honestly, I just wanted to do something completely different and new, something I've never done before. I think that was the main thing because, you know, I like to challenge myself. I think it's important, you know, to keep growing as a person and giving yourself, you know, stepping out of your comfort zone and doing things that are new is probably the best way to do that. And like I finished learning the whole system of Taiji Mantis, and I kind of was thinking to myself, you know, I've got my own system, my own training, and that's something that's going to be with me for life. You know, it's something that once you've got, you've always got, and you're always going to be growing and developing with it. But at the same time, it was like I kind of want something new, and I miss that feeling of being a beginner again. But it's like, well, if I just go and learn another style of Kung Fu, I mean, really, it's just like, you know, collecting more techniques, more forms. I mean, look, the application, the principles and stuff are not really that different, honestly, between different styles. I don't think there's very much, you know, when it really comes to using it. So it would really just be collecting more stuff. And I didn't really see any benefit in that. Whereas I've never done any proper formal grappling before, especially not ground stuff. So I thought, you know, this would be a great way to try, you know, something completely, you know, out there and different.
Very similar to my thoughts at the time as well. I just wanted to try something different and something I had no experience of, and that was a challenge. And then, boy, what a challenge it turns out to be.
Yeah. It's very humbling as well. You know, you go right back to, and when you're on the ground, it's like anything else you've learned is kind of completely gone out the window, and you're back to just like, I remember the first couple of times I was rolling, I didn't even know how to begin. You sort of do your little fist bump thing, and then like, okay, now what do I do? Sort of lie on the floor like a fish and flop a bit, and then someone suddenly starts choking you and you're trying to like get out of it, and you know.
Yeah. It's that white belt thing, isn't it, with jiu-jitsu? It's the white belt experience is initially it's completely being overwhelmed. It's like a fog, really, because you have no idea what's happening or how these people are managing to do what they're doing to you, because you're trying to stop them and you can't. You've just got like, you haven't got the technology to stop them. And then it's a bit like a fog, and then like over time, as you begin to learn bits and bobs, it gradually clears and you can start to see things, and you think, oh, well, that's what he's doing. I get it. I get what he's doing. Doesn't mean you can do them, but at least you can start to see them.
Yeah, I think I'm just like, I got my first stripe a few months back.
Yeah.
I think I'm just getting to that point now where...
Kind of a big deal now, eh? One stripe.
I'm now an internet expert.
Exactly. You're now fully qualified to lecture everyone about jiu-jitsu on the internet. Yeah. Perfect.
But yeah, it's just getting, you know, just starting to get to that point where I'm like, okay, so I know what the main positions are, and still can't really do very much, but
that's the other thing.
At least know what's being done to me.
Chinese martial art has stances, right? But Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has positions.
Yeah.
And that's a different sort of way of thinking about fighting as well, I found. Is that it's all about understanding the position you're in, and the sort of hierarchy of like good to bad within the positions. Like obviously the bottom of mount or someone on your back being the worst, and then like working back up from there to where you're on mount.
Well, I think for me, being on the bottom of side control is the absolute worst position.
Yeah.
It's where I always end up and probably spend most of the 5 minutes of the roll.
I mean, I've been doing jiu-jitsu a long time now. I remember for the first 6 years, side control is the main problem. And also the main place you go to hold other people down, because it's less risky than mount and less difficult than back control, you know, to get. Everything happens in side control, and being on the bottom is miserable. isn't it? It's
It is.
it's absolutely. It's called the 100 kilos position, 100 kilos.
Exactly. And for me being quite small, most people being a lot bigger than me as well,
Yeah.
I spend most of my time being suffocated and crushed.
How long do your rolling rounds last?
Usually 5 minutes. Sometimes we do 7 or 8 minutes.
7 or 8's quite long. I remember when I started, there was no such thing as rounds. Half the class was technique and stuff. Then the second half was just rolling, and you just rolled. You know, I'd go with Big Kev. He was well over 100 kilograms, and he would hold me in side control for literally 20 minutes because there was no time limit. And he'd wait until like right to the end of the class, then submit me. And it was like, and I say, well, why are you doing that? Why don't you want to just like try something? He goes, I'm just learning to put my weight down. And I think, Kev, you've got it, mate. You don't need to practice this. You've got it. It's fine. But it's miserable. I remember those days. But that's the alchemical process you have to go through, where you have to face hardship before you can progress on to getting good at something. I think it's important.
That's the big reward. I think is like, I don't know, maybe I'm like masochistic or something, but I'm really enjoying that process, and it's so nice to be back to the beginning and being in something where it's like,
I think if you don't go through that fire, it doesn't mean anything when you get out the other side, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of jiu-jitsu, we talked about that, like how overwhelming it is when you start, but what about the techniques themselves? How do you find those compared to Chinese stuff?
Well, that's quite a difficult one. Let me kind of think about this. So I think one of the things that's crossed over quite well has just been that sensitivity and understanding of both my own balance and center as well as the opponent's. And I think that's helped me pick things up faster, because you can feel like when people have got you in side control or whatever position you're in, if you've got someone in closed guard and they're just sort of kneeling there, like I'm already quite aware of where their center of gravity is and where the pressure is and where it isn't. And that's something that's definitely come over from having done a lot of push hands and sticky hands and those sorts of things. Recently, I've started, because in the beginning, my teacher always has us just starting rolling on our knees, but now I'm trying to stand up as often as I can and do stand-up as well. And then it's in the stand-up where I found that a lot of my Mantis stuff now comes in. Although the big difference is when you're sparring in primarily striking arts that also have takedowns, people tend to stand sort of side on like a bladed stance. So a lot of Mantis takedowns are dealing with people standing that way. So now that, I've got other people grappling and they're sort of standing more like square on and keeping their legs far back.
Yeah, and head down really low. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to get like the classical kung fu takedowns that I'm used to. So that's been like a big challenge. But a lot of the stuff, like my hand speed for Mantis is quite fast, and a lot of the hooking and trapping stuff has helped quite a lot with stand-up. And clinching as well. Mantis has a lot of clinching. There's been a lot of crossover on that side.
Yeah, because that jiu-jitsu uses a wrestling stance, basically, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You keep your hips back, your arms are in, elbows in, hands pointing forward, head down and forward. It's a very difficult stance to actually take down because there are no punches involved, so you can put your head in the way because you don't have to worry about somebody punching it. So it even messes up a lot of judo people, because in judo you tend to stand upright more, because there are no leg attacks in judo. Like, you can't grab the legs, it's against the rules. So they tend to stand upright more, whereas we want to keep our legs and hips as far back because you totally can just grab someone's leg, lift it up, and barrel them over, So, and equally, I found a lot of the takedowns I got from Chinese martial arts are also working on the assumption that strikes are involved, so you're more upright and you're keeping your head back as opposed to leaning in and doing a wrestling-based thing.
For sure.
It makes you think again about stance and all the things that contribute to like a martial arts style.
Mm.
What are the reactions like from your friends and colleagues in the Chinese martial art community to you starting jiu-jitsu?
Well, some people thought it was great. Some, some people were very interested to hear about my journey and what I'm doing. And actually, some people said they were unsubscribing from my channel now that I'm joining the Gracie cult, as they put it.
You've crossed to the dark side.
Yeah. Very, I didn't realise it's quite so divisive.
It's polarising, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I don't get it myself. Because, I mean, one of my teachers, my Shingi teacher, Damon, his whole philosophy of life, it kind of comes from his background in Kempo, which is learn as many martial arts as you can. You know, it's a really open sort of philosophy to martial arts. So obviously he's just like, oh, you started jiu-jitsu. Can I learn some off you? You know, and it's
nice.
It's like the complete opposite to these. And some of my Chinese martial arts friends kind of took great offence to me, like abandoning their art, so called.
Yeah.
And starting jiu-jitsu. They took it almost like a personal attack on the effectiveness of what they were doing or something like that, which is it's almost like they've overly identified themselves with the martial art they're doing. Like it's not an attack on you if I go and train something else. It's fine, you know.
Yeah.
Why are you so worried?
I mean, I think that a lot of people in the Chinese martial arts world have this idea of modern martial arts, which would include MMA, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, sort of anything like that. They sort of have this idea of like an us and them thing. And, I think that's been proliferated a little bit by like YouTube comment sections. Because I get like comments on my channel all the time, like, oh, try this in MMA. Yeah, try this in the ring or whatever. So people think that that's what most MMA people are like. But the gym that I train at, yeah, we do, jiu-jitsu, we do kickboxing, Muay Thai, we do MMA as well. And there's nobody like that. Like everybody is so nice, so supportive. It's such a great environment. And people ask me, oh, you do Chinese Kung Fu? Oh, that's interesting. They ask me about it. Like people are just genuinely interested in what it's all about. And I found when I joined some Facebook groups, BJJ Facebook groups, I was just surprised how different it was to like the Kung Fu Facebook groups.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It is.
Everybody's congratulating each other on stripes and promotions. People are asking for tips. They're like talking about hardships they've gone through in life and how jiu-jitsu's helped them get out the other side. And then, in the Kung Fu world, we're just like threatening each other over whether your elbow should be in or out,
Yeah, exactly.
It's just so different.
Yeah, I found the same thing. I mean, I've always been quite open with everyone that I was trained jiu-jitsu with that I used to do Tai Chi. And everyone's just been like, oh, that's cool. Like, no one has started jumping around doing kung fu poses and making animal noises and laughing at me. Yeah. It's like, that just doesn't happen. It's just, everyone's like, oh, that's cool. It's interesting. That's the approach. It's not some sort of us and them situation, like you say. And also, that idea that jiu-jitsu is modern as well is really interesting. I find that really interesting because jiu-jitsu...
It's a big topic in itself.
Yeah, because jiu-jitsu has been in Brazil longer than karate has been in Japan. That's the truth of the matter. It came from Okinawa to Japan not that long ago at all. And jiu-jitsu arrived in Brazil in like 1900... whatever it was, 1905 or something. It may even been earlier than that, but it was before karate got to Japan. So how's that for... what's old art?
That kind of raises the question of then, well, what is traditional? What makes something a traditional art or a modern art? Because, I mean, Taekwondo is commonly called a traditional martial art, but I'm reading a book at the moment called The Killing Art about the founder of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much a product of the 60s and 70s.
Yes, absolutely.
And we call that traditional, so,
Yeah, one of my friends, Paul, got invited to do he's one of the martial arts studies guys who do the journal, and he got invited to Korea to do a talk to Taekwondo people about martial arts. And he said that it's very much presented all the time as being really old and really traditional, and it's like it's a political point.
Yeah.
and you kind of can't say anything else. It's frowned upon, you know. The fact is, it's kind of just karate, right?
Pretty well. I mean, that's exactly what this book's talking about. It's a fascinating book. Like, people that are listening should check it out. The Killing Art, it's called.
Yeah, it's very good. And but they try and link it back to this. I forgot the name of it. This traditional. There is an older Korean thing. Taekyon, where like the kicking thing, Taekyon.
I actually learnt Taekyon because I lived in South Korea as well for a year, so I learned Taekyon for a short while.
See, my friend Paul got invited to a traditional Taekyon academy when he was out there, and they made him wear this traditional outfit, which looked a bit like lederhosen. It was pretty weird, and then taught him some Taekyon. He said the guy who taught him was brilliant. It was like, he said it was like doing push hands with your feet. So I don't know if that rings any bells to you.
It is, very much, yeah, because Taekyon is not. It's not like a combat art. It's like a game.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's not actually a martial art, is it? It's a sort of game.
So you do it to music, a little bit like capoeira. It's kind of rhythmic, and you're stepping in this kind of triangular pattern. And then the idea is you win by either throwing the other person to the floor or kicking them in the head. And you're not allowed to obviously you're allowed to grab to do the throw, but you're not allowed to block with your hands, and you're not allowed to do any sort of strikes.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's you know, these things that cross the boundaries between a martial art and something else as well.
Yeah.
It's always interesting. I mean, just yesterday, this thing appeared on the internet, which was a video of Mayatsu Maeda, who was the judoka that went to Brazil and allegedly taught Carlos Gracie. Although there's a lot of people that think that Carlos Gracie actually learned from a student of Maeda's, but that's by the by. But the video of him is him doing what we today would call pro wrestling. So it's like a very scripted performance, and it involves some judo throws, which they just take turns at, and then someone gets out of the audience, and they're all wearing like Victorian outfits because this is 1908. And some guy gets out of the audience, and they get him involved, and they throw him, and then it's very scripted, and it's entertainment. If you want to say what is the origin of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we tend to think of it as this art for dueling on the beaches of Rio, you know. Like its actual origin is entertaining the public in like pro wrestling bouts. So it's
kind of quite similar to a lot of the shuai. Like in China, there used to be this big culture of shuai jiao being like a performance thing, and they would have these. I think Byron put some videos on his channel of it from a TV spot on it. But you know, it's a bit sort of mixing like a sort of comedy skit with the wrestling, and you know, very much like pro wrestling, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you see those old paintings of the emperor being entertained by wrestlers. You know, they're not. He's being entertained by them. They're doing an entertainment. You know, it's not like he's watching MMA.
And I think this is something that people forget. Like, I do believe with Chinese martial art that there has always been a performative aspect to it. And when we look at forms, there are a lot of movements that, we can pull an application out of it. But I don't think when that movement was put in the form, their primary thought was, this is the most effective move ever. Yeah. There was definitely an aesthetic sort of, thing going on there where it's like, okay, well, this pose, I'm going to, do this combo, and I'm going to land, I'm going to pause in this pose. And then, the crowd's going to cheer, and then I'm going to go into the next.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Series of movements.
Yeah, and it could have been he was miming out fighting a series of demons, and he wanted to pose after he's done each one, and the audience would have known what he was doing, and it would have all been part of the show, And then those movements get handed down over the generations, I guess, and they end up in forms, and people think, well, this was purely about fighting, These are obviously the most efficient ways to kill people, presented in like the sequence after sequence in a form. It's like, well, maybe they're not. Maybe there's other influences to that.
Yeah, but even I think when you're looking at, when schools would have challenge matches, and it would be on the raised Leitai, and there would be a big audience there. There's also an element of a spectacle there, and when you look at say like Mantis, we have this common like hooked pose, and
Yeah.
then you look at Shaolin and they've got, these other poses. There's definitely an element of sort of like getting the audience psyched up, like, you throw a few punches at the guy's head, you get them a nice takedown, you slam them onto the ground, and then you sort of drop back and you go into your Mantis pose and look at them, and everyone's like, that's the Mantis guy,
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But I see, whenever I try and talk about this stuff on the internet, I just upset people, and they get upset with me, and they take it as a personal attack, like you're saying, you're calling me a dancer, not a fighter, or something. It's like, oh no, not really. But yeah,
I think we sort of look at all of this stuff from such a modern mindset, and we forget that the pre-modern world was so different, and that people's worldview and their sort of ideas of, even like how you would categorize. So it's getting a bit philosophical, but like, how would you categorize combat versus performance versus dance and other things? And I think there was a lot more crossover in the pre-modern world with different things than we perhaps, give credit for.
Yeah, especially with China, which went through all those in the 20th century, and for all those different sort of modernization processes that, because the European powers had effectively invaded and proved that European methods were superior, the Chinese nation had to like very quickly adopt all these different methods, and along with that came this sort of categorization of things, I think, which was a very Western idea, which we got from Plato. So we've had it for ages, putting things in little boxes, and that's that, and this is this. And like you say before, in the pre-modern China, everything was kind of like a hodgepodge of everything. Even the legal system was like tied up in their whole like religion and ritual culture and everything.
Yeah. And I think, there was sort of I don't know if the right word will be like a sanitization of martial arts, which was what the Guoshu movement and the Jingwu movement were really about, because after the Boxer Rebellion was like such a, dramatic failure. And then once China moved to being a republic, there was a lot of different voices out there. People were hotly debating, like, where should China go? What should China be? And there were people that just completely wanted rid of martial arts. They were like, this is just some superstitious crap. We need to get rid of this. These are just people like putting talismans, around their necks and conjuring up demons and whatever. Like, we should get rid of this. But what eventually came about was a sort of middle ground where it was like, okay, let's reform the martial arts. Let's kind of get rid of a lot of the supernatural stuff and the theatrical stuff, and let's, make it more of, I guess they sort of took on board, they copied a little bit like the Japanese Budo movement that was going on at a similar time.
Yeah, because Japan and China were quite friendly at one point, weren't they? Obviously before Japan invaded. Then things weren't that friendly, but yeah, China definitely looked at Japan.
They sort of borrowed from that and tried to make it more like a national, like a way of instilling national values, a sense of Chineseness in the population.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got the Western world looking at Eastern things and sort of fetishizing them in a sort of Orientalist worldview, and and then Bruce Lee appears and becomes this worldwide star, and all these. I mean, that's again, it's a continuation of the entertainment theatre tradition. It's just in movies,
Yeah.
But all these things are just like a heady mix with and then here we are today, with this various different strands. But I guess the thing is today, like you can go and learn something really traditionally Chinese, and you can also go and learn some sort of modern, in quote marks, jiu-jitsu. Like we have options these days which people I guess didn't have before, where we can choose from almost a smorgasbord of different things and just go where the heart wants.
I think if you gave those masters of old the options that we have, I mean, who's to say they wouldn't? I mean, they trained in what was available to them in the day, within the confines of a non-open society like China was during the Qing dynasty. Things like Chinese medicine, sort of Buddhist and Taoist ideas and things, that was the science of the day for those people. So if they wanted to get better at their, I guess, sport, for lack of a better word, their chosen art, much like now, an athlete would be like, okay, well, what's the latest developments in sports science? Or what about, some psychology that might help me get a better mindset? They were doing the same thing. They were accessing the various bodies of knowledge that were available at the time. And I think if you gave them, the modern stuff we have now, I think they'd probably adopt a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the figures in my lineage going back is Guru Zhang or Ku Chang, depending on how you pronounce it. And he trained he was like a northern stylist, but as soon as he got down south and met Choi Li Fut, he was like, oh, this is good. I want to train some of this. And then he then they always became sort of done together, Northern Shaolin and Choi Li Fut. And it would have been one of the first times that somebody like him would have had access to other styles. And he definitely embraced them. I mean, they were all Chinese styles, but who's to say that if he hadn't had other options available, he wouldn't also have been very interested in, let's say, boxing or something, Western boxing.
Yeah. Well, there is sort of a bit of speculation that some of the early 20th century masters in China were taking boxing and other things from Christian missionaries. And definitely a lot of the like the calisthenics sort of YMCA calisthenics type stuff that was quite popular in Europe in the early 20th century.
Yeah.
That definitely had an impact on the way martial arts were practiced in say, like the Jingwu Association and the Guo Shuguan and things like that. That idea of doing, everybody sort of lining up, doing line drills was very much inspired by what Europeans were doing.
Soldiers as well, because I mean that's how soldiers drill, right? So they're seeing Western soldiers drilling a lot.
Yeah.
So I mean that's another influence. Yeah, I mean I think I found out the other day that the first boxing gym in Japan opened in 1898 or something like that. Like it was a long time ago. And boxing's always had a big influence on Kempo, which is one of the things my teacher learned in Japan. And boxing had a big influence on that. Like you can see when he does Kempo, it's kind of just like a boxer's guard they put up, and that's a direct influence.
I mean, Mantis has a lot of things that you could say are similar to Western boxing. I'm not saying it comes from it, but I don't think I got enough evidence to really say that for sure. But there's definitely things that are similar. Some of the ideas of head movement, like the idea of feints and jabs and things, definitely similar.
That's it. We're heretics now. We're going to be burned at the stake. Suggesting Western influence to Chinese martial arts. How dare you? So, so do you think you'll be continuing with this jiu-jitsu that you started? How do you feel about the future?
Definitely. I love it. It's so much fun. Yeah.
Do you find did you need to get fitter to do it, or did he find you were unfit?
It's kind of like a different fitness. Because I also so the gym where I'm at, you pay your membership and you can do whatever style you want. You drop into any class. So I also do some kickboxing and Muay Thai. And one thing I find with that is, it's a lot more, because it's a lot more rhythmic. So there's a big fitness requirement, but it's a lot more. It's a lot easier to sort of regulate. Yourself. But jiu-jitsu it's so difficult to I feel to regulate your breathing and to kind of get yourself into that rhythm, because you are just being crushed so much and everything's very
that's the thing. Until you can control the pace, until you're good enough to control the pace of the other person, you have to go at their pace, and quite often it's not it's not optimal for you to have to go at somebody else's pace when they're better than you, because they're putting it on you, right? So they're that's the thing with jiu-jitsu. You make the other person work constantly until they're exhausted, and then they're a lot easier to beat then.
But it's like there's that common Tai Chi phrase, like 4 ounces repel 1,000 pounds, and using softness to overcome hardness and things. And one thing I like with jiu-jitsu is, you don't sort of have these poetic ways of expressing this stuff, but it's still kind of innately there, and you kind of learn it by doing it, because if you do just go in and try and muscle it, you're not going to last very long.
You last 30 seconds, don't you?
Kind of forced to learn to be soft and to try to use as minimal strength as you can.
Yeah, exactly. It's not philosophical in the same way at all, but it's working on the it's not working on the mind level so much as the body level. You have to feel what's going on, and you can't think your way through it. You have to. It's a feel and a reaction to the other person. I was just thinking about that phrase that 4 ounces beats 1,000 pounds. Is there a better way of describing the end position of an armbar than that moment where if you set an armbar up perfectly, you just need to just touch them with your finger to break the elbow. I think nobody says 4 ounces and 1,000 pounds in jiu-jitsu, but you could equally just apply that more poetic imagery to what we're doing, and it would just fit perfectly.
Yeah. There's also something very internal about jiu-jitsu, I would say. Like it's not sort of talked about, as we've said, but so last week I had the opportunity to roll with my teacher's teacher, and nice. I thought my teacher was like the top dog. I mean, he is really, really good. But I met his teacher and rolled with him, and it was like he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
But he just sort of out of nowhere, all of a sudden, I'm in an armbar. And then he'd stop and he'd look at me and he'd go, "What's your biggest problem?" And I go, "I'm in an armbar." He goes, "What are you going to do about it?" And he kind of let me figure the way out. And then all of a sudden, he's like over at the other side pinning me. And he goes, "What's your biggest problem?" And I'm like, "Your weight's on me. What are you going to do about it?" And he would just keep, but he hardly seemed to do anything. Yeah. And it was very similar to the kind of feeling when you in China and you do push hands with like a top level internal master, like a real top Tai Chi guy or somebody. It is very much the same thing. They don't seem to really use a lot of complicated techniques, but they just seem to do something to you and you don't quite realize how or why.
Yeah. And it's those years, isn't it? You can't become like that straight away. Mm-hmm. You only get like that through years and years of doing it. Like and you see the same thing in not just martial arts, but in any sort of skilled activity. Someone who's been doing something for 50 years, very minimal movements in whatever they do, and it doesn't seem like they're doing anything.
It's just such a honed kind of awareness and understanding of the body. Like, not even an understanding, but sort of like an innate, sort of intuitive thing.
Yeah.
Like, they don't really need to think about it. It just kind of happens. The body just sort of knows what it wants to do.
I'm thinking of that Chang Tzu. There's the verse about the guy who's carving up an ox, and he just says, "I just let the blade. I follow the blade. I don't try and do anything. I let the blade do the work." And it's that idea, isn't it?
So that's the kind of thing I think that's quite refreshing about jiu-jitsu for me, is that there is no mysticism, or there's no, like, at the end of the day, it is really, the end result is the same skill. It's this, as I say, this refined awareness of body and how to use it. I mean, jiu-jitsu primarily on the ground, say like Tai Chi push hands, you're standing up. But, they don't need to sort of drag you along with, seminars and complicated language to make sure you don't really understand what's going on. And it's just sort of like, I said to my teacher's teacher afterwards, I was like, "Man, how do you do that?" And he goes, "I've just trained a lot longer than you. Just work on your basics and ask the right questions and practice." And he said, "I'm still working on the same things as you. I'm still working on how to improve getting out of side control and things, but it's just at a different level. I'm doing it with other black belts, and you're doing it with other white belts."
Great. So, I really hope you continue this jiu-jitsu journey, because I did the same thing as you, basically. but longer ago. Right, anyway, I think we've done about an hour, so I think we should wrap up. But that was a great chat, Will. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, let's hope we haven't alienated our Chinese martial art friends any more than was necessary.
Probably look at YouTube like tomorrow and the subscriber count will like suddenly have dropped.
The hater comments will be out.
Yeah.
I can't believe these two have betrayed Chinese martial arts again. So if people want to follow your latest trip to Taiwan, how do they do that, and how do they follow your work?
Subscribe to the channel on YouTube, Monkey Steals Peach.
Yeah, so the channel's called Monkey Steals Peach, and it says something like Travels in China or documentaries or something, I think, next to it.
Yeah, but if you just search Monkey Steals Peach on YouTube, it'll come up.
Excellent, cool. Well,
there is actually a band called Peach Stealing Monkeys that I found.
Oh no!
They've been around longer than me, so. But anyway, it's not that; it's the martial art one. So.
Okay, excellent. Anyway, great chatting, and enjoy your Taiwan trip. And I look forward to
thank you. I'm sure I will
to seeing the results on your channel.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. You can find out more about the Tai Chi Notebook podcast at www.thetaichinotebook.com. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll tune in next time.